Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third day of Plan B project. Today we'll have multiple speeches as well as a roundtable that will start at around 1:30 p.m. Pacific time. So make sure to be online at that point of time, and every video of every talk will also be recorded and uploaded later on our YouTube channel, so make sure to subscribe and to get notified once they become available. So today our first guest would be Krzysztof Szafrański, who will talk about language-independent design principles for table and board games. Let's connect to Krzysztof. Hello, can you hear me? Krzysztof? Krzysztof, can you hear me?
Okay, then. So it should be. Oh yeah. Okay, got it. So the topic now, topic I would like to show you um, is the is language independent design, which is something what I found it's a quite unusual constraint for American designers that I met working with Boardgames, and it's pretty much popular. I think a very understandable thing for us, I mean, European, and these that's why yeah, so that's why I want to talk about this constraint that's both creative on some way. That will be the first part, and the second part will be about the cost issues. I mean, what would be the outcome of language independent design, and how you may use it to save some money. First, I will talk about uh, um, what I know about these board games, but I think it's also very it could also be helpful, like based on the video. So that's my first speech online. That's fine. Okay, so first of all, I was I would like to I was running a series of game jams, games lab, and we're using different constraints to limit the to speed up the brainstorming process and give some read to work on, like the scaffolding of the things you can that we yeah. So it was one of these ideas, and then the what's first what's language dependent. Yeah, this is the way of designing a game that you don't have to use any language dependent component. Like there is no text on cards on board or other, or it's like very limited. So this is the way how we usually design games for uh, multilingual environment. I mean, uh, first in the board game market started in Poland, uh, we weren't able to um, earn money on games only produced for the market. So we're trying to make as many language versions in a box. Yeah, so usually it was Polish English or Polish German, but sometimes Polish English German. Yeah? So with this constraint, you are limited to some 9 options that aren't available for when using fully environment for your if you're designing the game that's for example in English, and it's very easy to do this on multilingual or like international market at the start. Yeah. So these it ended now because because Poland is not completely market and we can maintain the Polish only games with easy and not burden. Yeah? But for example, this bilingual is very popular of Canada, for example, when they have English and French, or Belgium, you have Dutch and French. Sometimes you can find it in Southeast Asia, quite it's still being these versions could be found in Ukraine or in the Baltic states. Also, Nordic countries very often use like Sweden have like Finnish and Swedish for Swedish it's like some governments like there's a government will that you have to include the minority language as well as first language of the country. For me, it was also interesting, when I first came to the States I asked, why aren't you if the South American, Latin American are such a minority, like why aren't the games in the US available with the rules? Yeah, so like we don't games. Like for me, I was trying to solve that issue, and why it's for them as they don't see that the rules are included, it doesn't seem being invited for the yeah. And on some meetings, I was I found that the statement, yeah, we are everyone speaks English, so we don't need to edit it. Was very strong, yeah? And in most examples, yeah, like most complex games, need to use some sort of language. So this constraint doesn't work well. Yeah? But while making a game, you have to use like these. You can use it your advantage because making game in very simple way using a limited number of signals that you can send to communicate with the user of the game, and the designer is it sometimes can help you develop some like language like the program. Yeah, uh, this is easy option, also very easy, very very to validate the um, mm, to validate it's simple enough. Is already going into streamlining direction. I think if something what you're developing is too hard to explain on the early stage without reason that that, that you have a problem to make an like very easy icon to design it. Yeah, it means that maybe the like you are trying to put too much load on the interface. You are that you will probably use for the game. So it's not that that's the that's the way when you can find you are going in the direction. You were trying to make the first project like and you have too complex procedures that aren't able to be explained by the very uh, easy iconography. Yeah? So and also what you can think about the target clientele. Yeah? If you're designing games for children, it's very simple that you shouldn't use any card game because like preschool children aren't it's not that easy for them, yeah, as you know. So you can change the very like not very complex but the family game into children's maybe just by reducing the text load. Yeah. Also, we're looking at the quite complex things that are presented and so dating. I looked at a bit really were quite simple in its construction, but I mean that the games were easy and they had no language dependent component. But presentation, it was pretty strange. Like they were showing cards with many English are at the early stage. There is some need for language independent design for both for making it more palatable. I mean, the easier to introduce to some non-gamers that don't they don't know how to select that we on a very specific components in a very specific way, or there are uh, or there is, for example, games which you then easily introduce to multilingual gaming group. So or for children. So is it the just having that in mind on introducing information is language neutral tests? Is it like can you easily sell from if you can easily sell it to Canada, just adding extra roles, yeah? Or are there language dependent components on the uh, using only you can use only some part of the game that could be language dependent, and the rest of the game should be language independent. That's the like second part, not like leaving the design behind. We can switch to production costs and other problems that we create. So, like the not everyone is aware of that. Like with the total thing, uh, it's pretty important that to produce the actual product, and you're using regular printing machines. So the price of the not only the development but also the production of the few copies summed up gives us the very high start. Now, the sum of the cost of preparation of the tools and the um, first top put on the machines on the run is making game very very expensive in small amounts. just to I was just analyzing the series of production quotations. So if you produce the game, if you use the 2,000 copies as the baseline. Yeah. So the price for a single copy of the game when you put only 1,000 is about the twice as high. I mean, you pay so in print 1,000, 2,000 games, the usually the final quotation is about the same. Like but you get the if you add up all the costs, sometimes it's cheaper to get some things in. Of course, it depends the factory you're using. Yeah, sometimes this cost to get is quite high. 500 cost depends if the company you're using automated the manual labor, but you want to get bigger and introduce for smaller companies that I'm with one game for 20 interactions, 20 customers. Yeah? Like US were over 5, 6,000. And some smaller customers, like Baltic states, like Nordic countries, like Bulgaria, Romania, they are emerging markets on the board game industry. I had to offer them the much smaller amount, and we were starting with 500,000 instead of 5. So I had to take care of the production. So we had to make the game like, while it would be able, so we would be able to make it to make it cheaper, like for these for the customers from the smaller countries, the countries with smaller population, smaller market, and we achieved that by moving most of the language dependent language dependent mm, uh, language text layer onto the only one part of the game. So game boards and player boards were language neutral, tokens were language neutral. The text was only put on the text part because there were there was only written text there. The rest could be produced in a batch. I mean, if you bring all together, regardless how many languages you were producing at factory, you were sending on one file and producing it in a one automated run. Yeah, so and you could and what I also do some of the components for the print run would be coming late, but you were waiting for some customer, so you could add these on like put it away for like that. That's the way how I was taught to work. So that's why you can see the game the things that on Kirby they don't do. Here I was talking about the Dream Home. We had to competition between language neutral. I mean, saving money here, but we couldn't make the interface less. So the game has to have good flow. I mean, you have to. We couldn't move many components to the icon. I mean, the game instructions to the icons, because then we would lose some uh, we would lose game flow. That would be the worst scenario, and we definitely don't want to do this. So we decided, and during that the as few as possible cards would belong, and they so for example could be translated at home, or some of these cards could be swapped. Yeah. Finally, we didn't make these, but you can see that some cards are all or don't have any on them. Some have because they were needed here. They were reduced to the minimum. So this is usually a compromise between the production cost that you want to achieve as low as possible, but then you have to sometimes you have to add something to make the game pretty make the game as playable as possible. Yeah? So the and it's not always. So the production cost also includes some other. It's not only the solid of materials, the printing press, it's also cost stations and in that's the same as video games, yeah, but usually it's much more. So there's also a voiceover. There's also and there is much more. But when you have language independence, you can easier include more markets on the very early stage. Yeah, so you don't have to invest that much money to make the game possible to be played on without any English, for example. So you can start if you make game as simple uh, as you make it for children, or make an logical. I mean the very plain, but maybe like very simple impulse that deep in the game in value that you could that maybe possibly you could save money to on localizing them and reach the markets. We also quite often get some homemade translations for some of our games that that fans from different countries offer us, and they would upload to the official or unofficial site. So we could it was possible for the simple. Yeah. So currently, we're for example, we're using Draco, the game that has some miniatures, cards, and more. And when you make a localized version, you have to localize the box on the back with a description and add the rule. Yeah. So currently, we are producing three different box versions, each includes two languages. Yeah. For example, Dutch will have French and Dutch, and for our Spanish customer, that Portugal will add Spanish and Portuguese rules inside. Yeah. And we do with our Czech partner, they will check that, yeah, and the Slovak version Slovakia. Yeah. But they all would be packed into one box because we made the game mm, that that's possible for us to not actually not spending more money to make the game better for smaller local customers or smaller local uh, smaller local. without that, it's not possible. I mean, we would be we couldn't get such a good reach, such a wide reach of the games that we could. What else? Like if we make the game language neutral, for example, 8 or even 10 languages on the back of the box, sometimes all translated by auto translator, really bad. I mean, one of the worst possible ideas that you can have is to use like automated translation service and put these rubbish on the box. Imagine that not really what you not it's really not the game. The Polish language, for example, has many special and special signs that work really bad if you don't put them all together, and it's really there's something really disgusting if you know what you're looking at. So you don't want to use it. Yeah? But when once producing the game and reaching a higher number for the initial in the potential, yeah, you shouldn't so think about producing because the cost comes into storage. Yeah? So like if you want to produce, always try to start up to 1 year demand upfront. Because the like with the video games, it's totally different. Yeah, you don't have to store the goods that you produce. You're generating keys. I mean, the game medium, the distribution medium using, for example, others, doesn't just you pay a flat fee. You don't have to pay some extra money for storage. So there is no risk actually for losing even more money if the doesn't help you. Here you don't. We think also we have to offer that the thing is possible to the for easy. So for so usually we very cautiously. We think on that as we need to fulfill the initial demand. So and pay the of the first stage of production. Yeah, so we could be more like square with the printing. We don't wish producing too much, even if have the possibility with the long independent production that localize the game later into new market, use 10,000 of the miniature sets for the future game. And because even if we produce them cheaper, instead of producing 2 or 3,000, but we have to keep them more. So this is also the purpose. But for independent components, we can try to include more countries in the process. I mean, we have to be more careful when announcing preference and interest, not only for the machines or set for cards and building for punch boards, but we need to also communicate better what's the how many independent components we need. And sometimes we have to order to work with the customers to first order the miniatures to China to factory that's a final assembly. So these line miniatures, of course, are independent, but it's not easy to change that number or to put printer. So the co-production and managing production with other partners or selling games on a license, right? It's not a super easy endeavor. Yeah, you have to be able to keep everyone very well informed and on time uh, with their production, with your production schedule that you have. What else? Yeah, some other things that we were talking about is taking or thinking about the language and the component is is our game expansion, which is quite helpful for also for board games and board games and for board games you have to usually have to find a minimum order quantity that allows you to offer the game in non-repeat steps for sure. Yeah? So when you set the MOQ for 1,000 copies, yeah, that's the sum or most of the customers would order just this minimum order quantity. Yeah? So if you later on, if following year you think that the game has very good potential that for expansions, for example, you would like to start an expansion, but you have this situation that you no longer can produce the same quantity because usually demand for expansion in retail stores in the market that I know most of Central Eastern Europe, it's about 30% of the demand for the basic game. Yeah? So these so you cannot go that low. And for example, you produce the game in 2 or 3 languages using MOQ 1000. So then you have a situation that everyone wants to order 300 copies of the expansion, and it's not doable. I mean, the price would be for this expansion produced language dependent would be maybe even higher than the base game. And so, what's the kind of practical solution? That during the game development, you could think about the moving some of the if you already know that the game has to have text on parts components, you could you could you can identify them and treat them as the material for then easily move them from the core game out on separate box. And then while if you have very little demand for the expansion, yeah, you can mix like recycle all these ideas that have to be removed from the core game box, yeah, to recycle them as the expansion that easily print with just 3 languages on the box and rules, but for example, token sets or cards that the expansion for the already existing decks that you have in a core game, or for example, brain expansions, this kind of stuff. Expansions could be easily produced with for to fulfill much lower demand, to much uh, uh, too much yeah to, to, to markets that still want them and also potentially well to the sorry. So you can use them as the financial structure. Yeah? I will be finishing shortly, so if you have any questions, please type it in or contact me later. I'm available on Facebook mostly. What else? Yeah, why I was what are the very specific aspects the language independent of language independent production is that some companies can use the localized name of the game on the back card, kind of stuff, yeah, or use their logo as the initial publisher to make an extra decoration on some components. But when I get this game, I already know that it was done most of in United States because they really it's one of the biggest markets, yeah, you know. So they can easily use only one market, only one language demand to fill all the easily sell whole print run. That's that was used in 5,000, for example, as a starting number. So like when I get game, yeah, it's usually some extra work on localization. We have to read all these because we aren't really used to it. So at the moment when you open the next game, but any board game that you following 2 weeks if you are now working home and social distancing, take a look if there is if there is something to be optimized. I mean, if you can find some written text that's really easy to change the or some other language independent symbol, or maybe back of the cards instead of typing the name of the tag, what what it's used or can it be just so? For example, the next, and sometimes you can notice, yeah, that after releasing some after reaching more markets, the game was successful on its starting market. We'll see reference with using only some less language because then the language so it could be optimized for multi-language run. That's the same. That's the same. Some of our to relocate some of the to another platform because the first and all the mix on the on one each transport the mix of language dependent and language neutral components, but after for wrapping, we save some money and time for our partners while moving the all the language dependent value on separate set of transports and keeping the language independent on another set of. So there is much less for digital text desktop processing. If you are managing, you handle only half of the printed material, and because there is no mix of language neutral and language. Yeah. Uh, uh, so the conclusion, the my please understand my message that we are not thinking about the. I'm not trying to convince that I'm neutral game because it's probably not if you're thinking about the game or a game or strategical choices that you have to write everything on card. The complex procedure. Yeah? But if you're making an abstract game or a game that could be approached with it could be played with children, for example. And if you make the game simpler, maybe, just maybe, you could find a way to simplify it so it would be cheaper in production, cheaper in localization for following partners and maybe yourself, maybe your own studio. That you and you can start with better volume, sometimes with because some of the clients on your show could play the game in a box, and you can just say them the rules are available online for free, and they don't need they don't need to care about that, so they can play with their children or whatever. Uh, just take yeah, be critical when you see the game, when you're working with your game and see can we make it simpler? Because usually simpler means, my opinion, that's my make games better, make the game better, but not more complex on the on interface. Yeah, uh, yeah, these are my thoughts. I don't see any on the uh, on the on the chat. So that's all today for me. If you have any extra questions, please reach me at Facebook. Jimmy, you make comments.
Thank you, Krzysztof. So we'll go on a 5 minutes break, and then afterwards we'll have a talk from Heady-Carroll and Erik Wace, who will talk about the science of imaginary solutions. So keep connected, and we'll continue after 5-10 minutes.
Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Molly and Erik and Arcane Circus.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today, and welcome to our presentation, Chicken in the Wall, Pataphysics, the Science of Imaginary Solutions. So who are we, Erik?
Well, I'm Erik.
I'm Molly, and together we are
Arcane Circus,
a two-person team based in the Netherlands. We've made games such as Crap I'm Broke, Hodag Snag, Kimono and Chibi-chan Save the World, and Shooty. But you're not here to learn about us, you're here to learn about pataphysics, the science of imaginary solutions. So after this quick introduction, I'm going to tell you what pataphysics are, give you some examples, and talk about pataphysics in games. Then I'm going to turn you on to Erik, who's going to give you some pataphysical exercises and ways you can apply pataphysics to your own games, and then a couple of final thoughts. Let's get straight into it. Starting with, what are pataphysics? Well, pataphysics were invented by this crazy Frenchman, Alfred Jarry. He was an absurdist in the early 20th century Paris. He was very well known for his outrageous plays, such as Ubu Roi. Is that right?
Ubu Roi.
Roi. He was also known for being a strange person. Yes. He had a lot of things that he did that were very odd. Here's a few examples. He filled his apartment with owls because they're nocturnal like him. He ate all his meals backwards, from dessert to soup. And when he died at the age of 34, his final words in French were, "I am dying, please bring me a toothpick." An absurdist until the end. But Alfred Jarry's accomplishment that we're most interested in today is the creation of pataphysics, the science of imaginary solutions. Pataphysics was first coined in this book, Exploits and Opinions of Dr. Faust Roll, Pataphysician, which is written by Jarry in 1898. It's kind of about a pataphysician and his research into pataphysics, but to say this book has a plot is kind of stretching it. There's people dying and coming and being born on the same moment, and people's heads falling off because they don't know who somebody is, and monkeys, and we are talking about Alfred Jarry here. It's where pataphysics started. That's the most important thing. There's a couple of potential origins and word plays for what pataphysics means, but the funnest one, we think, is pataphysique, not your physics. Further trying to explain what pataphysics are, Jarry described it as a universe which can be, and perhaps should be, envisioned in the place of a traditional one. Now, here's the thing, pataphysics are really hard to understand, let alone explain. So maybe an easier way to explain to you guys what pataphysics are is to give some examples of pataphysical situations. Let's start with this one. In Labyrinth, we have David Bowie, and here comes a pataphysical moment. Whoop! That's pataphysical, what happened there. Let's do it one more time. See David Bowie, here I come, gonna get you. David Bowie. It's David Bowie. Oh my gosh. Here's another example, the manga Kawa. Now, in the manga, they fight this giant monster guy who they can't defeat, bullets bounce off of him, and they can't defeat him. But Kawa figures out that if you whistle, he turns small, and then that guy's able to whoop his ass. Finally, here's an excerpt from Through the Looking Glass. I'm going to read it to you. The shop seemed to be full of all manner of curious things, but the oddest part of it all was that, whenever she looked hard at any shelf to make out exactly what it had on it, that particular shelf was always quite empty, though the others around it were crowded as full as they could hold. So imagine that, shop, the shelf's full, and as soon as you look at something, it's empty, while everything else is full. All of these examples that we just gave make absolutely no sense in our world, but they make perfect sense in a pataphysical world, a world that operates on its own rules and has rules and solutions which are imaginary. Now here's the thing. Pataphysics is kind of not meant to be taken seriously. If you have questions, yeah, but what about this and that? Look, here's the thing. It's kind of a philosophical prank. It's not a watertight scientific definition. It's kind of meant not to be taken seriously. But that doesn't mean it isn't important, and it doesn't raise interesting questions about the world and what we do. History has a bunch of philosophical pranks. For example, Pastafarianism, which some of you might be familiar with. Pastafarianism is a religion that's recognized in several countries where people worship flying spaghetti monsters. And it raises really important questions about religion's place in public schools and how society will make exceptions for religion and things like that. And also, pataphysics was really important for influencing art movements that came after it. It was a big influence for Dadaists, Futurists, Surrealists, and video games. Yes, all of you video game developers here make use of pataphysics, whether you know it or not. And we're going to explain to you how. So, pataphysics and games. So to recap, also for the people who've just walked in, pataphysics is a universe which can be, and perhaps should be, envisioned in the place of the traditional one. Video games are realities simulated by technology that could be as similar or dissimilar to our own world. Now, there's 2 equal signs up there. Erik made me put 2 equal signs because I only had one because it bothered him because he's a programmer. I'm not a programmer, I don't get the joke, but some people seem to appreciate the joke, so. But back to pataphysics. So if you compare these 2 definitions, they seem pretty similar, almost interchangeable. And it's incredible to think that Jarry in the 1890s, who had no internet, no computers, nothing even close to it, was able to create this imaginary thing that came just over half a century later in the form of video games. It's incredible. So pataphysics and games. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of pataphysics in video games, bringing it back to our lovely medium. Now, of course, there's the namesake of this presentation, the chicken in the wall. In Castlevania, you can whip walls open, and there's fully cooked pieces of chicken, and you eat the chicken, and then your fatal wounds are cured. There's Super Mario Brothers. Oh my god, this game is full of pataphysics. Mushrooms that you eat that make you grow, and jumping up in the air and making bricks appear out of nowhere and money flying out of it. Even common things in games like one-ups and lives and dying and then kind of coming back, but also kind of back in time. Like, there's a lot of things in video games that we as gamers just go, yeah, that makes sense, because we see them all the time, and yet they're so pataphysical. Silent Hill has sound cues. Sirens, right?
Yeah, the world will transition once the sirens will sound into a hellscape.
Yeah, exactly. When sirens sound in this game, then the world is transformed into a hellish version of itself. And Katamari Damacy has the Katamari, which is able to suck up things that are smaller than it to grow until it's able to roll up people and then buildings and then continents and then turn them into stars. These are all examples that you guys are very familiar with, and sometimes it can be difficult to kind of see the ludicrousy in something that we as game developers and gamers are familiar with. So here's a game that a lot of you may not be familiar with, Attack of the Mutant Penguins for the Atari Jaguar. I found out about this game through the Angry Video Game Nerd, and he can explain this crazy game a lot better than we could, so we're going to let him do the talking.
Anyone who knows this game?
All right. Okay.
Looking for a treat.
Let's see.
Attack of the Mutant Penguins. I gotta admit, the name alone got my attention. But what the hell's going on? From what I understand, there's a bunch of penguins walking around. They buy tickets and then go into a transformation booth where they become evil mutant penguins. And from there, they go to the Doom Scale. Yeah, the Doom Scale. They jump in the mouth and then appear on the scale. So you gotta stop the penguins by using a weapon, for example, a baseball bat. How do you get the bat? You gotta collect letters that spell the word bat. Where do you find the letters? Inside treasure chests. But how do you open the treasure chests? A key, right? No, gremlins. Yeah, you collect what they call gremlins, and supposedly you drop the gremlins inside the treasure chest and then it opens. But no, it doesn't open right away. It takes like 10 seconds. The more gremlins you use, the faster it opens. But it doesn't open, it like explodes. When you get the bat, you gotta kill all the penguins, but they don't die if you hit them. Instead, there's a bunch of power orbs that scatter all over. You gotta get all the power orbs to power up your bat so you can kill the penguins. But you only kill the penguins wearing hats because the ones that don't wear hats fight the ones that do wear hats. If the mutant penguins on the Doom Scale outweigh the regular penguins, the Doom Scale starts screaming and going apeshit.
So yeah, that's a thing. I swear, if Alfred Jarry was alive now and making games, he would make games like Attack of the Mutant Penguins. So all of these examples of pataphysics in games that we've shown you, no matter how crazy and wild, they're not total they're not total nonsense. The games do follow rules, and they follow their crazy rules consistently. And that's essentially what games are, a system of rules. But the way that they represent those rules could be anything. It can be beyond the real world. And when you see this, it's almost as if games are pataphysics. So that's all the theory out of the way. I'm going to pass you on to Erik now, who's going to give you some practical exercises and thought processes that you can use to apply pataphysics to your own games. So go ahead, Erik.
Thank you, Mo. So now you have an idea of what pataphysics might be. So first, let's start off with trying to get ourselves into that mindset to think in a pataphysical way that we can perhaps then apply to our games. So you would start off with the question, you want to start making a game and you want to make use of pataphysics, but you have to kind of convince yourself of this reality that still has to be defined. And how does one go about that? You want to indulge yourself into a reality that is not set here. So one thing we like to mention is there's a lot to be gained from you and yourself. There's this core that everybody will have that they can really tap into that makes you the uttermost you. And everybody has a unique way of looking at the world. The associations that you make and the observations that you make might seem obvious to you, but not to others. And this is something that you can really utilize to, make very strange connections, perhaps, to others, and use that in your game design specifically. So I know it's a really good example from They Live, where, he looks at the world completely different than everybody else does. How to do that? We've done a talk before. It's called Your Greatest Asset When Making Games, You. And we've done this at Indie Gamil in 2015, but it's available on YouTube. So if you are curious how to get to that core of yourself, there's a couple of tips that we have. It's quite a lot, which is why we can't really go into too much detail about that, but let's move on. So, your dreams. Your dreams are a really great source of this pataphysical inspiration, because your dreams are your subconscious associations that you will make. Because, your memories, your day-to-day existence, they basically all intertwine into this one reality. Things that are completely disconnected, but will form into this one whole. A good example to kind of illustrate how that will manifest is this clip from Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, where Jim Carrey as the protagonist, those who know the movie, he's going through memory removal, but the kind of segments they show is very reminiscent of basically how your dreams would work. All these disconnected elements from similar memories will form into this one reality. So it can be quite intriguing. Also, to go back to the surrealism from Jarry, being the surrealist and absurdist he is, the surrealists also made games, which is pretty cool, just like us. And they used this subconscious as their core mechanic. And let's go from left to right. Let's start with the exquisite corpse. Perhaps there's some people who already done that when they were kids. You'd fold an A4 into 3, and then one starts off with drawing the head, and then fold that over. Next one draws the body, and then the head, and then the feet. And then you will result into this weird contraption. So that's one of them, but it gets a bit weirder with the automatic writing, the middle one. Basically, what you can do that with pen or paper or with your computer, and you start writing everything that will come up into your mind, and you do not stop. You just keep writing, even nothing comes into your mind. You just keep going, really trying to tap into that subconscious. The third one is an interesting one. Just a little example. If I were to ask you to close your eyes, this is how the game works. So you close your eyes, and there's someone at the door. Knock, knock, someone at the door. Who is it? And I will reveal this person, and you will have to immediately tell whether you will let this person in, yes or no, and explain immediately why. For instance, knock, knock, who's there? Elvis Presley. No, I will not let him in because he's smelly and his albums are made of plastic. I don't know. That's tapping into that immediate subconscious, so just no inhibitions, what's it that you could call that?
Yeah, no, without inhibition.
Yeah. So we have a great book with us. It's this one, which is basically some of these games that we just mentioned are a collection of the surrealist games from that time period, also when Jerry was alive. So if you want to play some pataphysical, some surrealist games, I'd say check them out with us. Come play.
Yeah, we have it with us, so if anybody wants to play some games with us afterwards, then come up to us and we'll play with you.
And you could do drugs. Hallucinogenic substances. Absinthe, ether, LSD, mushrooms, you name it. But the whole point of this is when you hallucinate, it kind of is reminiscent of when you are dreaming. You are making these subconscious associations that will turn into these weird things like, whoa, man, I'm tripping balls. I mean, that is something you can do.
Just saying.
Just saying. So once you put yourself in that pataphysical mindset, okay, how does one go about applying it? What does that result into? Let's go through an example. For instance, in a game, you want to be able to fly. Okay. How does that work? How do you fly? For instance, okay, wings. But that's a bit, it's quite derivative. We know that wings, because, wings make you fly because birds can fly. Okay, let's be a bit more absurd. Headphones. How do headphones make you fly? Okay, this is a challenge that we need to now back-engineer why this would work and be logical in this pataphysical world. This is what I came up with. Headphones allow you to play music. If you play specific types of music, then you will feel uplifted. You will feel uplifted, you actually become lighter. When you become light enough, you can fly. So as you see, there is now logic to this absurd reality. And this is consistent. Now that we've just defined from this moment into this, as a game design, then you can start analyzing this. Because every subset, all these steps represent rules. There's a rule set. So let's analyze this. Okay, you need headphones to be able to listen to music or audio. So when do you obtain this headphone? Could it serve a different purpose? Is it a kind of protection? Can it play color? Even more pataphysical. The music. Music makes you feel uplifted, therefore makes you light. What other types of music could there be that would result into a different reaction? That is something you could ask yourself. When you become light, you can fly. How does one fly? Do you need to kind of like push yourself forward or something? How would that work? How long can you stay in the air? Does that immediately stop when you take off your headphones? And those are all kind of questions, and you can just ask yourself, just purely based from that initial crazy association. So this is indirect. It's quite indirect. So let's let this sink in for a little bit and go to the final thought. So, what can we conclude from this? There's a lot that you had to kind of take in at this point, and if you still don't quite know what pataphysics is about, that's all right, because Andrew Hugel has the following to say. He says, to understand pataphysics is to fail to understand pataphysics, and to define it is merely to indicate a possible meaning. So what he means by that is you as a creative individual, you can just create your own logic and own reality. That's the whole point of it. If you try to define pataphysics, that would be saying, okay, this one definition would encompass the entire all the possibilities of imaginary solutions. It's a bit ballsy, it's a bit much. So, it's meant to be interpreted by you and how you want to take it. So it's important for you as a creator to be more aware that pataphysics are quite, closely connected to video games, and that that this is something that's part of it. You would have more control over the intended experience that you would be creating. For instance, you can kind of see then how Attack of the Mutant Penguins and Silent Hill would differ from each other the way they implemented. Perhaps Silent Hill is a little bit more subtle. Attack of the Mutant Penguins a bit more absurd. So knowing that, how it applies those pataphysical realities allows you to gain more control over what you want. And I want to leave you with a question. So these pataphysics, how can you make pataphysics more significant to your game than just using it to function as quirky visuals to represent the rules? I think these two games here on the left is Another World, and on the right, Heart of Darkness, made by Erik Chahi. And he manages to really use the pataphysics, just the very few that he uses, is spread out and consistent throughout the entire world and narrative of the game, making it all the more stronger that you constantly get in touch with those same realities. I'd say observe some of these games. This is a good example, I think. So we're done with talking. We want to hear about what you have to say about pataphysics, what your pataphysical game ideas are. So we have a hashtag, not your physics, Pataphysics. So we'd love to hear what you guys come up with. And let's go to some conclusions. Pataphysics, basically elves can smell purple. Staring too hard into mirrors will allow you to see your future. And bananas will become snakes when exposed to sulfuric acid. Thank you very much. If you want to contact us, you can always send us an email at info@arcanecircus or contact Molly HC and at Erik.
Yep.
Circus. Yep. Thank you very much. And I believe there's time for questions.
Okay, any questions?
Things we need to clarify.
Was it that good? We answered every question that could ever be answered with this presentation.
We can see. Is that on?
Yeah.
Oh, I can't tell from here. Maybe a dumb question. What's your favorite pataphysical construct that you've encountered in any sort of medium?
In any sort of medium. Oof, it's quite broad. I think also some of these examples that we use, like what's it from Labyrinth, has a lot of those kind of pataphysical aspects of it. Your favorite one, Alice in Wonderland, is something that really
Oh yeah, well
that.
Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass are my favorite books, period. So I really love them. I do also really love Heart of Darkness, because which was the one with the kid pushing the shadow, because there's so many pataphysical things in that game, and yet it just constantly, like, it's consistent throughout the world. It never feels like really wacky and trying to be crazy. Like, it all works. So I think as far as games go, Heart of Darkness is a good one, and I suggested that one when we were looking for examples. But I would say Alice in Wonderland for me.
Any more questions? Or things you want to share?
Yeah.
That's also,
if anyone has any cool pataphysical game ideas, you can share them now.
Share your thoughts.
I'm going to keep them to themselves and make it into a game.
I think something I also find interesting to see as we were working on this presentation was how much pataphysics is integrated into lots of different media. I still find it really cool to see the examples that we used before. I was just scattered throughout literature and comics and film, you know, like it's so great to see the imaginary solutions that people have gone through to be able to, like, it's so great to see all these possibilities.
And how connected it is to games as well.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we already knew it was connected to games, and that's why we made this presentation. But as we were researching it and really, like, defining things clearly so we could explain to other people, there was a moment where I had to take a break because I was like, games and pataphysics are like the same thing. What the fuck?
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
That be it. Thank you very much for attending, and we'll see you around.
Hello everybody in internet land, and welcome to Pataphysics, the science of imaginary solutions. My name is Molly Heady-Carroll. I am the co-founder and artist at Arcane Circus. We are a two-person game development studio based here in the Netherlands. Our first commercial game was Crap I'm Broke Out of Pocket, a mobile game that was released back in 2016, and we are currently working on Kaijak Card Attack, a kaiju-themed card game for Switch and PC. And we're going to talk to you today about pataphysics, the science of imaginary solutions. After this quick introduction, I'm going to tell you about what pataphysics are and give you some examples. Then I'm going to talk about pataphysics in video games, And then you're going to be passed on to the co-founder and designer at Arcane Circus, Erik van Wace, who's going to give you some exercises for pataphysical thinking, ways that you can apply pataphysics to your games, and conclude with some final thoughts. So let's go. Start with, what are pataphysics? Pataphysics were invented by this crazy Frenchman, Alfred Jarry, who was an absurdist active in the early 20th century. He was famous for his absurd plays and books, and also his very eccentric behavior. Some of the things he was known to do, for example, he filled his apartment with live owls, because they're nocturnal like him. He ate all his meals backwards, starting with dessert and then working his way up to soup. And when he died of alcohol poisoning, it said his final words were, "I am dying, someone please bring me a toothpick." An absurdist until the end. Pataphysics was originally coined in his book The Exploits and Opinions of Dr. Faustroll, Pataphysician, in 1898. It's a wordplay that's based on pataphysique, not your physics, pataphysics. And it's defined as the science of imaginary solutions. Now, what is meant by this? It is meant as a universe which can be, and perhaps should be, envisioned in the place of the traditional one. Pataphysics is kind of hard to understand, let alone explain. So hopefully if I give a couple of examples, it may be a little bit easier to understand what pataphysics are. Let's start with this moment from Labyrinth. See David Bowie here walking, and then all of a sudden, he flips up on top of the platform. What's happening here? Let's do it one more time. Here he comes. That is pataphysics. Here's an example from the manga Kawa. Our heroes are in a forest and they come across a monster who can't be defeated. Bullets fly off of him, punches do nothing. But then the protagonist Kawa discovers if you whistle, the creature becomes small and defeatable. That is pataphysics. And of course, the absurdist masterpiece Through the Looking Glass is full of pataphysics. Here's one example I'll read to you. The shop seemed to be full of all manner of curious things, but the oddest part of it all was that, whenever she looked hard at any shelf to make out exactly what it had on it, that particular shelf was always quite empty, though the others around it were crowded as full as they could hold. That is pataphysics. Why are these all pataphysics? Because they make absolutely no sense in our world. These things would never happen in the metaphysical reality that we function within. They just couldn't happen. And yet they do within these fictional realities. These fictional realities operate on their own pataphysical rules. Now, you may think, yeah, but what about this? And, but this conflicts with that. The thing about pataphysics is it is and always was meant to be a kind of philosophical prank rather than a hard science. But that doesn't mean that it's not important and useful. History is full of philosophical pranks, which by making fun of society make us question it in interesting ways. And pataphysics had a massive influence on many art movements. Dadaism, Futurism, Surrealism, to name a few, but most important to this presentation, video games. That's right. Anyone watching this video who is involved with the creation of video games is influenced by pataphysics, whether they're aware of it or not. So let's go back to the definition of pataphysics. A universe which can be, and perhaps should be, envisioned in the place of the traditional one. Video games are a simulated reality. They're simulated by technology, and they can be as similar or as dissimilar as to our world as the creators would like. You have simulators like Farming Simulator, which make an effort to be very similar to our own reality. And then you have games like Weird Dreams at the bottom there, which make an effort to be very dissimilar from our reality. Some games are a system of rules, and something that's very interesting about the human brain is it is constantly and automatically trying to make sense of the input it gets. It's always looking for patterns, it's always trying to connect those patterns and make sense of the input that it is getting. And because of this, as long as a game's rules are consistent and as long as the player has enough patience, there's a pretty good chance that a player will be able to understand the operations of a video game if they play it long enough, because of this automatic need to make sense of things in the brain. And the less connected the rules of the video game are to our reality, the more pataphysical the game becomes. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of pataphysics in video games. Let's start with the NES Castlevania game. In this game, you can whip open certain walls and a fully cooked piece of chicken is in the wall, and then you can eat the chicken, and then all your wounds are healed. That makes no sense in our reality, but perfect sense in the world of Castlevania, which is pataphysical. Then you have Heart of Darkness. In Heart of Darkness, shadows kind of operate on their own plane of existence. You can see in this GIF here that Andy's shadow is able to interact with the shadow of the rock and affect the physical version of that rock. Actually, Heart of Darkness uses shadows as a theme in many aspects of it, from the character designs to the rules of the world to the game mechanics. It's an excellent example of pataphysics in a video game. And then we have Mario Brothers. My God, there are so many pataphysical things in this game that gamers kind of take for granted, like jumping up in the sky and a brick appearing and money flying out of it, mushrooms making Mario bigger and smaller, going back to Alice in Wonderland once again, and even things like that are really commonplace in video games, like lives and continues and things like that. You know, like finding this thing that means that when you die, you go back in time and then you get to try again. It makes absolutely no sense in our reality, but we accept it in video games, and those are all pataphysical. But then, of course, we have the pataphysical masterpiece, Attack of the Mutant Penguins. This is a very strange game. It is not very well known. In fact, the first time we heard about it was from watching the Angry Video Game Nerd. He does a much better job of explaining how this game works than we could do, so I'm going to let him explain it.
Attack of the Mutant Penguins. I gotta admit, the name alone got my attention. But what the hell's going on? From what I understand, there's a bunch of penguins walking around. They buy tickets and then go into a transformation booth where they become evil mutant penguins. And from there, they go to the Doom Scale. Yeah, the Doom Scale. They jump in the mouth and then appear on the scale. So you gotta stop the penguins by using a weapon, for example, a baseball bat. How do you get the bat? You gotta collect letters that spell the word bat. Where do you find the letters? Inside treasure chests. But how do you open the treasure chests? A key, right? No, gremlins. Yeah, you collect what they call gremlins, and supposedly you drop the gremlins inside the treasure chest and then it opens. But no, it doesn't open right away. It takes like 10 seconds. The more gremlins you use, the faster it opens. But it doesn't open, it like explodes. When you get the bat, you gotta kill all the penguins, but they don't die if you hit them. Instead, there's a bunch of power orbs that scatter all over. You gotta get all the power orbs to power up your bat so you can kill the penguins. But you only kill the penguins wearing hats because the ones that don't wear hats fight the ones that do wear hats. If the mutant penguins on the Doom Scale outweigh the regular penguins, the Doom Scale starts screaming and going apeshit.
That's Attack of the Mutant Penguins. If Alfred Jarry was alive today and making video games, he would make Attack of the Mutant Penguins. Looking at the definitions of pataphysics in video games, a universe which can be envisioned in the place of the traditional one, and a universe simulated by technology, it's kind of incredible how similar these two concepts are. And it's incredible to think as well that Alfred Jarry, who was alive in the early 20th century, who didn't have anything even close to modern day computers, the internet, video game developers, was able to envision these realities operating on their own rules and invent a science around it. It's absolutely amazing. And pataphysical thinking can be used as a tool by developers. We can take advantage of the brain's natural need to make sense of the input that it's getting, and we can make interesting associations through our video games, through pataphysics. And we have a big opportunity to be artful if we use pataphysics in our games and when we're coming up with how we'd like to make our games. So how can you do that? Well, I'm going to pass you now on to Erik van Wace, the co-founder and designer at Arcane Circus, who's going to tell you all about how you can exercise pataphysical thinking and also apply pataphysics to your own video games.
There we go. Thank you, Molly. All right, let's go to the practical side of things. So, in using pataphysics, the idea here is first going to talk about how to get into the mindset of things, and then how you can apply it into your video games. So the idea is you need to try to convince yourself of a reality that has yet to be defined. How does one go about that? Well, first of all, you need to set yourself a direction of where you want, how you want your players to feel, and what you want, what kind of sensations and emotions you want them to go through. And there will be a direction to set yourself off, such as, do you want to make a more fantastical or whimsical fairy tale kind of feel, or do you want to more do like, I don't know, like a dark Tim Burton-esque kind of sensation of these things? So at least set the direction first, and then you can really go into the mindset, because it will really require that you really immerse yourself in the reality that you're going to be defining. So you need to feel it if you want to be able to convey it to others. And that's really important in this case. So the idea is to create your own wonderland. You're going to create your own wonderland for yourself that you're able to return to in that mindset. So that then you can use that as an inspiration for new ideas in your game design. So the mindset is what's important here. So you need to create a mindset for unusual associations. And in order to do that, you need to lower your inhibitions, your thought inhibitions in this case. When you're tapping more into your subconscious and lower those inhibitions, then you're able to come closer to the core of your personality, something that really makes you you, because nobody else sees the world like you do. And you can use that as a very powerful creativity core. Something that feels intuitive to you or seems logical to you might seem very unusual or strange to others. And that is something that's where the power lies for you. And you're going to use that to create your own world. So, ways to be able to do that. First of all, you need to, the important is that you go along with your own absurdity. So you need to let yourself flow. You need to let yourself become a bit crazy, become a bit mad. So how can you do that? Create a safe space for yourself. Either do that with people that you trust that can, that allow you to, that they will enable you. They will enable you to be crazy or stimulated. Or you can do that, in isolation as well. You need to really feel it and really get in the moment, and you don't need the outside world to mess with that vibe, because you have to deal, in this reality, we have to sometimes conform to social norms and values, and that can completely destroy that mindset. So you need to kind of just really let yourself go in your own world and let it flow. And that's then one way of going about that. Another way is to make use of your dreams, the dream logic. That's all about it, because all these rules that you can analyze and dissect that are happening in your rules, and that's all deep inside your subconscious, and that's beautiful, because your brain is just flowing and flowing, making all these weird associations that you might normally not think of when you're awake. So the tip: keep a dream journal right next to your bed. The moment you wake up, you had a dream, write it down or draw it out, whatever it is. You need to do it as fast as possible to do that. And the more you make use of your dream journal, writing these things down, the more you do that, the more you will start to remember your dreams as well, which is very powerful. So I'd say make use of that. Another cool thing, the Surrealists, they made games as well. And these are very fun because they used their they used the subconscious and lowering your inhibitions kind of as a core mechanic in these in these games. The Exquisite Corpse is one of them. You might have have experienced this game in high school or primary school, these kinds of things. I have, so I thought this were fun, where you fold a piece of paper and everybody do it with multiple people, where everybody draws a part of the animal, and the others can't see what they drew, and they have to fold it over, and the other person continues, and you end up with this very interesting contraption. But the more these other two, automatic writing and Would You Open the Door, they tap way more into your subconscious. So automatic writing, how does that work? Take a piece of pen and paper, you do it on your computer, and you just have to write down the thought process without stopping. So you start writing, and you cannot stop. So whatever pops into your head, you write down. You have to do that for a certain amount of time, until at some point you think it's enough, and then see what comes out of it, because there's all these interesting things that you might be able to use. So that's a fun one. Third one, Would You Open the Door? This is fun. You can do that with two people, and one person thinks of a person, an animal, or an object, could be anything, and they present it to the other person like, would you open the door for X? And the other person has to immediately respond to either yes or no, and the reason why they would or would not let the person's animal or object in. So knock knock, to give an example, like knock knock, who's there? Would you open the door for a pizza? No, because pizzas are fungusy and smelly and something like that. I just immediately allow my subconscious and these weird things that come up immediately, just spurt it out. And the more you do this, the more you get in touch with your subconscious, and that's excellent. Thank you, Surrealists. So a tip for that, these were just a couple of examples from this book, a book of surrealist games compiled by Alistair Brocci. I'd say check it out. It's pretty cool. Yeah. So another thing you can do is do drugs. It's a thing that's been done for centuries now by all sorts of people. It dates, like in history, it dates back to where the shamans have been used to kind of like contact the spirits kind of thing. So artists use it, such as Jari, for their crazy ideas and stuff like that. You can do it, but it's all up to you. It's a way to get into that state of that you experience when you're having a dream, and then you can maybe do it more consciously, and that's something that drugs have the power to do. Just saying. All right, so now that you have put yourself in that mindset by using some of these methods or triggers, that allows you to go to your wonderland that you've created for yourself, and then here are some methods that you can start thinking about to apply it, to come up with some game design and that kind of thing. So here we go. I'm going to use the example of, for instance, okay, you want to be able to fly in a game, and normally people would go for direct associations, like, okay, birds can fly, so and they have wings, so if you have wings, you can fly. That's very derivative of the real world, and that's something in Pataphysics we want to move away from. So we're going to go for the indirect association. So in this example, we want to go by, you think of something that is disconnected from the flying, and then we will start to make associations towards getting to the end result of flying. So the cause and effect, and make a string of associations that will try to get us there. For instance, I thought of this one where use headphones to listen to music. A specific type of music would put you in, will make you feel uplifted. When you feel uplifted, you will actually get lighter. And when you're less heavy and become more light, then it allows you to fly. So now I have this string of associations that I went from the cause to the effect, couple steps, and it's still, in this case, make it seem more logical. So each step in each association is a mechanic, is a rule. It is a rule that you can then apply into your game design. You can analyze and perhaps utilize it in any other ways and shapes in a game if you want to have something like flying. So you can dissect that and analyze, hey, how can I use that further in my game design? What you could also do is you go from the also an indirect association, where you go from the endpoint and you start making each association step away from it. So the further removed, the more disconnected it becomes, but it'll still be tied in with all these rules and logical steps to it. So, for instance, you want to fly. In order to fly, I don't know, like air can steer you up, and then in this case you have the bubbles, the air bubbles that allow you to go up in the air, for example. What has bubbles? I don't know, fizzy drinks. So then fizzy drinks, if you drink a fizzy drink and you get bubbles, which is air that allows you to fly, which comes to the idea of what Roald Dahl did in the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, where they can fly. So then, yet again, just a couple of steps away, there's all these rules that you can then apply. When you burp, the air goes out and then you go down. So just a couple of steps away, you can then apply it and analyze it to your game design. Another way to go about it is just to make completely disconnected absurd cause and effect. So instead of trying to make a logical association with all these things, it's just this does that. And by not providing any explanation to it, is what makes it feel more pataphysical, so to say. It makes it feel more, maybe like some people would describe it as, oh, that's kind of whimsical. Here's a couple of examples. So you have when you smell a leak, you fly, or you pet a bunny, hey, I'm flying, or I poke the side, ooh, and then you start flying and then you go off. It's different. There's all these possibilities. So you can make it as absurd or more tied in with things that make sense. So depending on how pataphysical you want to make your game, is applying it in these various ways. But there's probably some other ways that you can think of as well. So some final thoughts. So you have the mindset, you have a way to maybe make interesting associations to your design, or just go completely absurd. And now you have an idea of what pataphysics is. But even if you don't, doesn't matter, because Andrew Hugo, he wrote a book about pataphysics, A Useless Guide. And he says, to understand pataphysics is to fail to understand pataphysics. To define it is merely to indicate a possible meaning. So we have given some ideas, but this is by no means conclusive, because, defining it beats the whole purpose of it. It's the science of imaginary solutions. And anything that any of us can imagine is possible. So we're all very curious, of course, what you will come up with. And what's just important about this is that you're aware that pataphysics are a thing, and to what extent you want to apply it into your video games. So, for instance, like certain games might have hints of pataphysical elements into it. If you look at Castlevania, it might be a bit moderate. Whilst if you look at Attack of the Mutant Penguins, it'll be way more absurd. And if you're aware of how much, in what moderation you're using pataphysics, it allows you to gain more control over the experience that you are creating, and then perhaps you can lead to the eventual result that you had envisioned. That's something that is the idea of what we want to have maybe in game design. So I want to leave you all with the question. How can you make pataphysics more meaningful to your game than just using it to function as a quirky visuals to represent the rules? We're very curious what you have to say about that, because we want to hear pataphysical game ideas. Hashtag not your physics. Send them out. So please let us know. And if there's anything else, let us know. But to conclude this presentation, elks can smell purple. Staring too hard into mirrors will show you your future. And bananas will become snakes when exposed to sulfuric acid. Thank you very much. You can always contact us through Twitter or email. And I think that'll be it. Okay, Molly, I'll come over.
we're going to start where we are going to start on the, yeah, I don't want to bail. Once I say I'm going to do something, I absolutely just do it. So, yeah. So I just posted it. Awesome. So my name is Nika. I run a international nonprofit called the Independent Game Developers Association Foundation. And what we do is we kind of reach out to marginalized communities, minorities, LGBTQ, women, etc. And we focus on helping the video game industry as a whole be more diverse and inclusive and really focus on the workforce on that level of inclusivity. And what I had the roundtable kind of talk about is kind of like very honed in on a unique situation that we're in. And we are basically looking at like how, you know, like we already have like 2020 with a lot going on in terms of like the video game industry coming under scrutiny, games becoming more mainstream, where people outside of our industry are paying attention to it. And so we're kind of looking at, you know, how do we change the way we build experiences and resources and opportunities of bringing communities into games in a really healthy and safe way? And now how do we do it in like a remote era, right? So like we run 3 major scholarship programs for us. There's Velocity, which focuses on women and non-binary women that are women and non-binary individuals that are looking for their very first job in video games, or they were in games and they'd like to come back after some time. We've got the IGDA Scholars, which is focused on students internationally from different areas of the world that would come to GDC and go through mentorship and boot camp and programming to help find their first gig. And then we have an awesome program that's really supported by Microsoft and Xbox called Next Gen Leaders, where we look at folks that are kind of like mid-tier or somewhere mid-level in their career already that kind of need a boost, you know, to like just kind of move forward and get additional mentorship and, you know, help them succeed in game development, in whether it's a small business or a current gig they have within a company. And so even for us, like it is such a shock, right, to go from getting prepped, spending all year, going through hundreds and hundreds of applications, a really rigorous committee selection process, and basically have everybody from around the world flights booked to come to GDC only to be canceled. And so we think, well, how, okay, just because, you know, GDC can't go on, which is absolutely fair because health and safety is critical, we need to rethink how we reach these communities because, you know, a physical presence or physical conference and all for folks to have jobs to begin with. So we're, at least for us, we're looking at digital programming for our, you know, for our awesome grantees, but we're looking at like, what does it mean to help people find jobs in a way that isn't physical, isn't, you know, so cost intensive and online? And then how do you also do it given, you know, that there is some toxicity and harassment online, that there isn't that level of camaraderie that you get as you do in person? Or how do you build camaraderie with a cohort of awesome different backgrounds through a digital space? And so those are kind of like our challenges. And I think it's always been a goal of mine coming into this role to make, you know, like the general crux of what we are much, much more accessible, much, much more scaled to a global level beyond like 60 people. To me, it's like we can do so much better than 60 to 70 people a year into the industry, right? Like how do we expand those numbers? And I think we have a really unique position this year to pilot with the awesome group we have and then figure out how do we build for success so that we don't have to reach thousands upon thousands, but if we're able to create enough impact that is scalable, it would be a unique problem to solve. And I know that was a lot, but that's kind of like the layup to what we're facing, what we're thinking about. And that's really been, I think, the biggest question is acquiring and recruiting talent, um, and recruiting them based on merit and skills and helping them enforce the skills that are needed for these jobs. But now, how do we do that in a remote era? And I think especially, I don't know about you, but I would say that even the right now, which is like great as a small nonprofit, right? As we can use this time to operationalize and like figure out what resources are needed. But if we were to roll out a program today, people are just way too distracted. I think I recently just read a study this morning about how like your brain processes levels of threat, fear, and safety, which debilitates your ability to focus on tasks because we do obsess. And I think that's, again, completely valid. These are totally unprecedented times. But now it's like, okay, if we do build out a remote program, like when does this become normal enough for people to actually focus on this? When is the good time to even roll out a program that we're proposing? And is the current market of alternative online programming so saturated because everybody's pivoting at the same time? Yeah, I totally agree. And I think like diversity and inclusion within games is also obviously important. One of the reasons why we focus on kind of expanding the workforce and being more inclusive is because we do believe that as the workforce becomes more inclusive, you're gonna kind of adopt or adapt to having more inclusive games, more inclusive scripts, more inclusive narratives. And like, right, like it's not the end all be all. We want to empower people to even create their own games if they're not happy with what's on the market to kind of represent those key areas and those key qualifications. Um, and I think like right now, like one of the sharpest learning curves will be how do we overcome this oversaturated market of content, uh, especially in the short term, given that we don't really know what's going to happen for quite some time. So, and right, because it's almost like I don't know about you, but like my inbox is filled with like resources and guidebooks and how to go through. And I think we're almost overwhelmed with the amount of content we're sifting through on it, right? Like how many more articles, and they're all valid, right? But how many more articles and markets are going to write about like 20 different wellness ways, 20 different whatever. And so like for games, where is and what is and who is like the centralized source for our industry to say, look, this is how you work remotely, this is how we're reaching out to communities. And I think we're just very uniquely positioned as employees, as consumers, as gamers. We know how to connect remotely. We know how to social distance and to collaborate and play together online. So it will be really interesting to kind of go through our program, and we're obviously always open to ideas, but like how do we kind of move that idea of how we play together online into how we work together? And for us, it's going to be really, really focused on bringing together individuals who don't really feel like they have a place in the industry, or they have a big desire to get a place, to have a place or a job in the industry. And it's difficult too, right? Like we're going to look at providing resources on how to get a job in the industry. But I totally understand, as people are watching the news, reading whatever, that you're going to have potential hiring freezes. You're going to have jobs that aren't ready to hire anyway. And I think that will be another kind of project for us, is as we communicate with partners, sponsors, et cetera, on our programming, is figuring out the status of like, are you still interviewing people for jobs? Are you still employing? Like, what are the next steps? When our company is going to kind of normalize and accept job applications again? And I know that was just a little bit of a tangent, but I think that's something else too. Like we can equip people with all the knowledge in the world, but if those jobs aren't readily available, then that's going to be another issue for us.
Mm-hmm. But for example, as you mentioned, like the like your community and that you're part of, like what is the way that you like reach out to these companies, and how do you like make sure that like there is opportunity, and like how do you measure and like understand if there's like more of these like job offers on the market, and if there's a possibility like to like basically for people to get hired?
I mean, in the short term, we are, as we're building out our digital programming, like we had a lot of awesome partners teaming up for GDC. So we'll probably be going back to those same companies with like, here's how we pivoted, here's how we moved the experience online for our 60 plus grantees. Prior to all of this, I mean, the number one thing that most companies have come to me with is, we have two problems. We're having not difficulty, but we are really focused on talent acquisition, meaning like getting a great range of applications. And then the second problem they have is talent retention. It's keeping awesome people in these jobs. So if it's folks that they're looking for, we have not just the grantees that we currently have, but we have the applications of awesome, wonderful people from all different walks of life, all different backgrounds globally, that are totally looking. It's all about matching them up. And then, but it's also like, we don't want to match up people into unhealthy environments. I don't want to put that, woman who's going through our velocity program looking for their first job. I don't want to put them in a job that's not going to be a great fit, or, I don't want to have them lean into a position they're not comfortable with, because then they're not going to come back. Then they're going to leave the games industry. You almost like, right? Like you need to build a very healthy house with all, with like adequate, right? With an adequate roofing so it doesn't leak, with the door that locks. Because if you start this process being kind of janky, then that person's not going to have a great experience and they're going to leave. They're going to get swept up by another tech company and leave games as a whole. and I absolutely love the programs that we have and the folks we have. But I think that, you know, we're an awesome, like, bootstrapped nonprofit. Everybody works so hard. All of our volunteers are freaking incredible. I just think that we can do better than 60 people a year. So, right, I mean, if you have 60 hireable folks, there's definitely more than 60 jobs in the industry. I mean, the HR people we talk to, they're looking to fill in hundreds of jobs. They're looking to fill in all sorts of stuff. So that's where, like, the two pieces don't fit. And for us, our role is to stabilize the point A, which is the job seekers to the job openings in this current time of turmoil, making sure that they're well, they still have mentors, that they still are getting a resource. And, like, how do we move this 1 week GDC experience that we put them through a rigorous week-long experience? How do we move that 1 week into, like, an awesome 1 month summer program? I'm totally digging that cow statue behind you, by the way.
Yes.
I just cow. There's a Charmin and hand sanitizer. It's like, right.
Yeah, that's
Right.
our realities of current time frame. So
Absolutely.
yes.
Right. And
And
there's
also-
so many factors into moving something online, right? Like, not everybody has the space to, you know, have a beautiful backdrop. And right, it's like, how do you look professional in your online stuff? I literally had to make the decision: do I use this dining room with this backlight, or my sister's old, very, very pink room with lots of Pikachu and Jigglypuff toys in it, which is appropriate for our industry, but maybe not something you want in a job interview. There's technical challenges. If you're from different parts of the region, you have different time zones, you have connectivity issues, you have all sorts of other needs. We don't even know yet, like, if everyone, we put out a survey, like, if people even have the adequate or appropriate hardware to log in. And so, I mean, these are just like a few of the things we're kind of solving for.
Yeah, and do you think, for example, like for all the for the community which is there, is there a way to like create like one space where like everyone would be able to, for example, like a platform where you have companies that like seeks for like specific talent, and like the talent which would be able to like access this like one portal or like one place, because then you don't have like this like shattering of the like job offerings and like people who like go to like different websites, to like, I don't know, Ubisoft, to, I don't know, Bandai Namco and so on. And instead of like going like one by one, there's like a separate like unified experience for like all the companies who like seek for something like very specific within like the community that we want to support and we want to create, to have like this direct connection basically between the community and the like basically the companies that want to hire them.
Yeah, and I think that's a very interesting question, right? Because our role is, as a nonprofit, is that we're connectors, we're resource driven, we are a community. I absolutely think that there's got to be a way, you're right, to stabilize it, to kind of have the pool of talent have access to those that hire. But at the same time, our role isn't, we're not headhunters or HR, right? But I think that there's possibly room for, right, because there's might be room for looking into a third party or a company that is a professional kind of human resource people and talent manager for the space of like increasing D&I in games. And I think that they're right, like for us, like we don't pretend to do what we do and we don't do, right? Like we're not going to pretend to be excellent headhunters. I think the process of actually finding, like going through an interview is a different personal one. And for us, we can, you know, right, like we make the introductions, we work with these companies, but at the end of the day, like I've never done narrative design. I've never worked in Unreal or Unity. That's not my background. So it's not my place to like connect and fill those jobs directly, but there might be a space to look into working with somebody else to say, hey, we've got this awesome pool of talent. You know, like we're always in touch with talent acquisition folks at these companies. Or if you're like, I don't want to work at a company, I want to start my own business, or I want to go work in an independent studio, or I'd prefer to work in a smaller company. I think there's space for professionals in that to come in and be like, hey, we're going to team up with the foundation and help connect that last mile of like from person to job or person to activating whatever your dream or your next step is. Because we operate very much in the spirit of transparency. We do certain things really, really well, which is being a nonprofit, doing research, focusing on D&I, bringing people together that are in need, figuring out like how helping them maneuver this really interesting industry we're in. But we also know what we're not. And I think that's one of the things in games is we have so many big problems that we're constantly trying to solve for. My philosophy is not to stretch ourselves thin or be everything to everyone, because that's when you start failing your grantees and your mentees. And I think I think that's an interesting thing that you've brought up, but there's absolutely space to have professionals out with that.
Yeah. Also, also one point, for example, like for game development companies, of course we have like a big companies, like big corporations that like,
right,
of course want to like diversify their teams. They want to like improve like the inclusion within their teams and within their games. But there's also like a smaller studios, like smaller indie developers who kind of like limited within the resources and limited within the possibilities that they have. Maybe they also have like the ideas like to execute on that, but of course they like don't have the possibility to do so. How do you think like how can they like go to like this next level? How can they like improve the diversity like and improve the inclusion to their indie games and indie titles?
Yeah, I mean, we work and partner with folks of all shapes and sizes. I think that's one of the reasons why conferences are so valuable, is because it brings everyone together, not just the big guys. I don't like you know, when you have someone who is 21, just about to graduate, you know, they've got stars in their eyes and want to work in games, and right there looking at all the big logos. I personally, I say, do what you want, go through them, apply, we'll guide you, we'll go through the resume, we'll workshop it, we'll practice interview. But I always say, hey, look at some of those more independent companies, independent studios, the smaller teams, because in a smaller team in a smaller office, sometimes you just get a better environment because you just gain a lot of experience quickly not working in a bureaucratic space. I personally prefer the smaller companies, smaller studio lifestyle, because to me, it's like a family. You work on a product. And so I get the allure, but what I find kind of even just through this past year is that people, they look at the AAA, but I find that a lot of the heart and the spirit and a lot of the expertise and even our mentors come from the more independent side of games. And I think those are the folks that we strive to kind of work with, because it's also just more accessible and less bureaucratic. At the end of the day, I'm just happy for anyone who gets their first gig in games. We do our best to guide them to where they are, but we don't tell people what to do. And especially for the summer program, for the online programming that we're doing, I'm looking more to the independent developers, independent companies, smaller studios for mentors, for supporters, for people to do kind of like our online programming, because I think you know, if you're one out of 7 in an office, you're going to wear many different hats, lots of different levels of expertise. But if you're one person in a company of 300, the ability to grow and expand your skill set isn't really there. And that's nothing to do with video games. That's just any company you go into. If the organization is, you know, 50,000 plus, your role is going to be a very defined role, and you're going to have to go through ladders and upward movement. But if you like that lifestyle, that's perfectly fine for you. But games are so creative and fluid and pivot, and there's a lot kind of going on. And so if you're one of 10, one of 15, one of 5, there is just a level of experience you get from that startup-y lifestyle, from that small business lifestyle. It is just such invaluable experience that you'll never get anywhere. I've been at an association where I was our CEO's first hire, and when we grew to like 15 or whatever it was, I've been at companies that were 30 plus people. I've been at much larger entities and organizations, and now come back to an organization that's 5. There is no experience as valuable as being somewhere small, because you just learn so much business acumen, professional development, people management, that even just project and product management. There's just something that you can't, like, you cannot quantify it. And it is awesome. And it's, even if you don't like the experience, it's a great experience to have to say, I hate this. But it's so much harder when you get into like a big company that has a lot of perks and free snacks and whatever, and the awesome 401k. There gets to the point where you have all these perks. You kind of don't want to leave those awesome packages. So my advice to a lot of people is, especially if you're starting out, or if you're young, or you're making the pivot, like, go somewhere small and rambunctious and mighty, and then, work your way into something else, because it's a lot harder to go back.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, since especially like when you like join like a smaller company, you kind of like have more challenges, and you kind of like need to figure out like on your own, or like together with the team, like how to solve it, compared to, for example, if you like join like this like AAA company, and you're kind of like just like given this task, or like they're giving you like this small like areas of responsibility that you're kind of focusing on, which is good like to specialize in something. But if you want to really like get more knowledge within the industry, and like have like a broader overall knowledge for like the game development itself, or like writing or design, of course like smaller companies like a bigger potential for growth, I would say. And I have one last question. So for example, from like your experience that you had, what was the most inspiring like story, or maybe like some inspiring situation that you like dealt with, that kind of like made you like feel that what you're doing is right, and what you're doing is actually like what helps people?
I think so, like, very few people that have diversity inclusion titles or roles in any tech industry, very few of us grew up to become diversity and inclusion leaders, right? Like, nobody woke up and was like, I'm gonna help minorities and people, and right? Because you don't grow up seeing yourself as a minority. I grew up in an awesome, like, Middle Eastern household where like we didn't have any boys. My dad basically raised me as, right? Like, I like all the weird shit that like girls in my neighborhood didn't like, right? Like, I left Batman, comic books. I got bus tickets to Comic-Con and didn't tell my parents. Grew up in a household of video games. I was constantly put in science and STEM classes because that's just our culture. So I didn't realize, like, I was never prepared for the real world, and like how other people don't grow up with all those same values, how gender roles, right? In my household, my mom runs the house, runs the business, runs everything. I've only seen super matriarchal cultures and households. That's just what I grew up in. So I had the culture shock of kind of leaving the home. And even when I was lucky in college, it was just a bunch of, what we classify as nerds growing up. But when I left and entered the workforce, I was just in a world of hurt. It was just very painful. And it was fine because, you learn resilience over time. But having worked in a lot of various industries, politics, internet, startups and VC culture, and then games, I would say between games and politics, I had felt the most sexist, misogynistic, discriminatory environments than any other industry. For sure, video games was I have seen a lot of things, but without question, video games was much more difficult for a person of my stature than even the political realm of our US government. So that's kind of what kind of stepped up. That's kind of like what really inspired me to kind of move forward with this role. And one other thing that I would say is people who don't fit the mold of what our expectations set us up for the workforce, people that don't necessarily fit there, you end up dealing with like smaller compounded levels of stress. We definitely have this like very like millennial view of, everything has to be zen and mindful and have no pressure, etc. And as much as I agree that we need to be practicing intent and mindfulness, what I absolutely disagree with is that we have to live these very stress-free lives. And I think one thing for folks who are feeling discriminated against is we have the ability, and this is what I like to focus on guiding our folks, is how to build your resilience as people. Because games will definitely be one of the most stressful work environments for a long time. And there is power in like dealing with a little bit of stress, learning how to cope with it, dealing with a little bit more stress, coping with it. I mean, what happens is not right. These obstacles put in the way based on what you look like, your race, creed, gender, that's absolute bullshit. That's absolute bullshit. But it also enables us to become really high performers, individuals who can be cool as a cucumber in really intense moments. And that's where I'm hoping that at least this position or my time in the foundation will help me with these folks, is guiding them through building resilience, because these obstacles are going to happen no matter where we are or what we do. Whether I'm walking down the street in New York or heading out to the grocery store or dealing with a pitch meeting or trying to figure out whatever is next, I think where we move forward is we accept our environment isn't great. It's our foundation's role to change the environment as much as possible for the better, but it's going to take generations to change for us to not be terrible towards one another based off of like the skin we're born in. And the best thing we can do is promote and empower people to become able-bodied, awesome humans. This industry is, unfortunately, it is not for everyone. It breaks you down. You don't even have to be a person of color or whatever. It just does. There's a grind. We're now heading to mainstream where literally like people are paying attention to us the way they pay attention to music and movies. And so now the question is, being honest with yourself is like, is this what I really want to do? And if you do, then let me help you build these tools of resilience, not just to be awesome at your job, but to also learn how to cope with life.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, and I think that's actually what the most important part. And yeah, I think we'll be wrapping up soon. Do you have some last words to the audience?
No, I just think if anyone has time, space, ideas, etc., to kind of join our summer online programming that has experience, breadth, and depth in the industry, we are welcoming all sorts of groups, instructors, mentors, partners. I know that there's a lot of call for, speakers and folks with all sorts of conference and programs, but we just have an incredible, 60 plus grantees from all over the world that we're so excited to fly to GDC. And we are looking to, figure out how we scale this in the long run, even when we go back to business as usual, as we have these conferences go down. And I think that, diversity and inclusion is always such a hot topic but we are really intentional about it. We're not speaking into diversity inclusion for the sake of speaking into diversity inclusion, right? Like we're trying to get it to not be another freaking talking point at a conference because we just don't want it to be a problem. And I would just say, like, thank you so much to those who organized this alternative conference. I know things are difficult and transient, and for those that like kept it going through this and like helping all the speakers out, even trying to organize something, get people together, right? Like that's another true testament to resilience. And I think that yes, we'll be, in isolation for however many more weeks. It'll be what it'll be. It's not in our control. But what is in our control is our ability to connect and talk to one another. And there is no industry more uniquely capable of doing that than our own. So I would say, like, everyone get your ducks in a row, like take the space that you need to take. Everyone should do whatever they need to do individually, and then let's get together as a community and let's get some shit done.
Thank you, Nika, and thank you also for participating and having time to join us, as it was crazy weeks lately, and of course it's hard to catch up with everything what is happening right now, but at least we appreciate that you were also able to like participate and be part of our alternative discussions, alternative talks to GDC as a space for the community to at least get some knowledge from the speakers and from people who were not able, of course, to come to San Francisco due to the current situation. Thanks so much. Then I hope we'll hear from you more, and we might have some more days in the future, as we'll see how the situation will unfold as more conferences will come up soon. So we'll might have more sessions, and I hope we'll hear from you as well at these sessions.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have
Thank
a good
you.
one. Bye.